Greetings, my dungeon denizens. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Ben Bolin, Dungeon Master, Gentleman, all-around bastion of bardic badassitude. I am here to talk to you all about one of the most irritating and one of the most rewarding parts of being a Dungeon Master. Namely, what to do when your party decides to go off the rails and make a train wreck out of all your plans. This is a guide to improv dungeon mastering. It's nigh impossible to avoid. Dungeons & Dragons is played by geeks, and geeks are silly, clever creatures. No matter how well laid your plans or how tricky your traps are, you will often find that given the choice between breaking down a door or picking a lock, they will instead decide to tunnel through the wall. And this is perfectly fine. Always remember that it's just a game, and the point of playing is for you and your friends to have fun. Okay, but what do we do when our players decide to jump the shark? It depends on the situation, and a few basic rules apply. The first rule in such a situation, and I cannot stress this enough, do not, under any circumstances, punish your players for creatively solving a problem. It will leave them feeling resentful and annoyed and cause friction and the lack of trust. And that is the last thing that you want in a D&D group. Trust is essential. But don't be a pushover. The second rule, you are the rule maker. You are the DM and you decide what goes. If a player believes that their power can melt through a stone wall, but it only does 1d4 damage normally, you're the person that gets to decide if that works or not. So be careful, be judicious. Make sure that you choose wisely when it comes to this sort of thing, and don't let your players steamroll you just because they threaten that they're not going to have fun, otherwise then they'll leave the group. If they're threatening that, you don't want them in the group anyway. As for actually coming up with something in the moment, there is a solution that improv comedy has brought us called yes and. For those who don't know, yes and is a rule of thumb in improv comedy, where the performers accept the last thing that was said, the yes, and then build off of it, the and. This applies perfectly for D&D, and in general, you want to say yes to whatever your party does. However, since we're the keepers of the rules in the game and we don't want players to exploit the rules, instead of saying yes and, I personally change it to yes, but. Yes, you can jump on that golem's back, but make an athletics check at disadvantage, and if you fail, take an attack of opportunity. Yes, you can intimidate the merchants into giving you a discount, but the local watch will be following you much more closely. Yes, you can tunnel through the wall, but that might bring the ceiling down on your heads. Essentially, it's all about choices and consequences. If the PCs do something insane, someone's eventually going to come along with straitjackets. Just remember the last rule. Be fair and be consistent. If casting Acid Splash to melt through a regular lock suddenly doesn't work for your players when it's worked every time before, they're going to be frustrated. And the same if a bad guy starts using spells or abilities in crazy ways, but when your players try to do the same thing or use it in a similar way, and you just say that, oh, I'm sorry, you can't, then they're going to get annoyed and be distrustful of you in the future. It's perfectly fine to set limits, but do so in a way that your players understand that there's a reason for it, or a special circumstance. Like, say, if they've been melting locks with Acid Splash, then it makes sense that people are going to start enchanting their locks against low-level spells. Alternatively, that bad guy that is doing crazy things with their spells or abilities, maybe they're doing it because they have intense training, or because their heritage allows them to do such crazy things. Always have a good reason why your players can't do something, and be judicious in applying restrictions. Sometimes your players might come up with ways to bypass those restrictions, and if you think it's fair, let them. You can always add crazy things to counter it later. That's half the fun. Alright, now that we have a decent idea of how to handle your PCs doing something insane, let's look on some suggestions on how to prepare your game as a whole so such things don't throw you when they happen. First, never assume an encounter will go precisely as you want it. Dice rolls can go either way, and it helps if you have at least an idea of what to do if someone rolls a natural 20 at the right or wrong moment. Second, know how to structure your adventure. I personally organize my adventures so that I have major story beats or encounters for the players to move towards, and then allow the players to wander about and explore in between. This can require some effort in world building, but it also gets the players more invested in the actual world itself. Third, have a few encounters prepared. Heck, you don't even need to go that far. Just have the stat blocks for some monsters or NPCs on hand in case the players decide they want to go somewhere or do something you weren't expecting. Fourth, know the mechanics. 5e is thankfully very light on these, especially when compared to previous editions. But even small things like knowing what makes a good number to pass for a skill check, or what the rules for grappling are, can really help keep your game flowing when your barbarian decides that he absolutely must learn how to ogre surf. Finally, and most importantly, look at your players. If they're having fun and you're having fun, then you're doing a good job. If not, then think on what you can do to make it fun. Remember, improv doesn't always go one way. You and your players will play off of each other, so take the opportunity to keep them on their toes. And don't worry, things will almost certainly be crazy and ridiculous, but, like with most things, practice makes perfect. And that's that. Hopefully the next time your players decide to jump the shark, you will know precisely what that shark is packing. Until next time, I'm Ben Bolin, and this has been a guide to improv dungeon mastery.